What's good, DMV Sports Zone? It's Noah back with a Capitals and Washington Wizards fantasy recap. I know that, again, it's been on Wednesday, still busy with travel, and with the holidays coming up and the fantasy football season coming to a close, these Wizards and Capitals recaps will become an even greater focus. Glad to continue to be doing them heading into the season. Hopefully, we can do them on Tuesday. If not, it'll be posted again on Wednesdays. Really excited to talk about this one particularly because we have someone to talk about, and someone that I've talked about quite a bit before. Nick Jensen, who at 31 is having arguably the best season of his career and is surprisingly ahead of John Carlson on a majority of consensus Norris Trophy watch lists. We could be seeing a second pair of defensemen arguably challenge for the Norris Trophy for the league's best defenseman. But does that translate to fantasy stats? I'm here to answer that question. Before we get into that information, all my fantasy sports analytics data is coming from Sport AI. More information on the app is in the bio. We are excited as so many more users are coming out of the platform. A lot of great feedback. We got a lot of new updates coming in. So if you want more information to download the app, the link is in the bio. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome back to DMV Sports Zone.
Chased down by Beal in the corner for three, gets fouled and hits.
Welcome to DC.
Well, they tied him out.
You know when you're at the USA Cup, you're taking it slightly. I'm taking it slightly. Now how you gon' act when we gon' be right back? When we gon' be right here, we gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. DC, the home of Chuck Brown. Oh, you don't know the sound? Well, let me break it down.
Yeah, so first things first, let's talk about the Capitals and Jensen. So we already talked about Samsonov before. As predicted, he's really taking a stranglehold on that number one role. Back-to-back starts, back-to-back wins, excellent goals against average, and save percentage to go along with the strong record for Samsonov in these past couple of weeks, averaging under 2.3 goals against average, 92% save percentage. At this point, if you have Vanacek, he's droppable, as I already talked about before, and you have to pick up Samsonov. He will finish as a top 10 goaltender for the fantasy hockey season, which is great for Caps fans. Ride him as long as he can stay healthy. But now let's get into Jensen. So I know a lot of people don't even know who that is. Little context, we picked up Jensen last year from waivers from the Detroit Red Wings. An American, just like John Carlson from Minnesota, but it was traditionally a third pairing, second pairing guy. Wasn't really much of an impact player up until this season. So far in 26 games, he has 11 points, has a lot of great advanced stats, really suggesting that he can win the Norris. You know, he's shooting at a decent percentage, 8%, plus or minus 20, which is top 5 in the league now. 46 hits, 36 blocks, is just a very efficient, elite shutdown defenseman. Playing on that second pairing is really taking off the pressure from Carlson to have to do everything. So Carlson can really play more of an offensive role. As a result, that's great for the Capitals. They're the best team in the league right now. But what does that mean for fantasy? We have to hold the brakes, and we have to look at it a little bit deeper. So arguably, he's not a great offensive player, obviously. On pace for the full season, he's on pace for 28 points. So far, he has 46 hits, though, 36 blocks, plus minus 20, as I mentioned before, but only 3 seconds of power play time. But he does have the highest amount of shorthanded percentage shifts on the Capitals, using in a shutdown role. I know I've mentioned before that, especially on ESPN, a lot of the major gaming platforms for fantasy hockey, there has been more of an emphasis on hits, shots blocked, as well as even time on ice for some leagues now. He's currently averaging just under 20, which for a defenseman is okay. You know, that's good. Still functioning as a top 4 defenseman. But that's why I said we got to pump the brakes a little bit, because he's a great real-world player, but He's a jack of all trades, master of none, but not in this situation. The second half of that quote, which is master of none, still better than the master of one. He does a lot of things decently. He, picks up hits, shots blocked, time on ice, plus minus, chips in offensively occasionally. But his role clearly is a shutdown defenseman, as Dmitry Orlov, our most pure offensive defenseman, is on that pairing with him, and they're arguably our best pairing right now. But it doesn't translate that much to fantasy. He is a solid depth piece. If you're in anywhere from a 14 to 12 team league, I'll obviously pick him up as a great depth defenseman, but anywhere from 10 under, it's a debatable pick because he doesn't offer the consistent scoring, nor is he chipping in, a huge amount of blocks or a huge amount of hits or a huge, outside of the plus minus. That's not that much to work on. So the consensus from the analyst perspective going forward is he's going to be a solid depth piece for fantasy hockey leagues, but just because he's in the buzz for the Norris Trophy discussion doesn't mean he's going to be an elite fantasy defenseman. So that's the reality. He's just nothing more than a solid depth piece, which I've talked about the past couple of weeks. So most teams will find some use for consistent defensemen like that, but just don't expect him to be the sleeper pick of the year. If you get the opportunity to pick him off of waivers, currently owned in under 30% of fantasy hockey leagues on ESPN. It's pretty similar with Yahoo and a lot of the other gaming platforms. So yeah, that's a pretty quick wrap up on the Capitals. Let's briefly talk about the Washington Wizards. So I mentioned before the struggles of Dinwiddie, and he's continued to struggle, not tremendously yet, but these past three games have been pretty atrocious for him. Only averaging 5 points a game, just under 4 assists, 5 rebounds. Mr. Triple Single. But it's a very short streak. They're playing Detroit tonight. He was taking some break. The Wizards are taking him very carefully as he had a severe knee injury with ACL last year. So he's been continuing to sit out back-to-backs. He's got a great opportunity to rebound against the Detroit Pistons, arguably one of the worst teams in the league, and is offering top 15 fantasy points per game against opposing guards. So that's a really good opportunity for Dinwiddie to bounce back. Obviously, he's not droppable, but expectations are getting lower and lower for him, so we're going to have to remain to see what happens. The Wizards' success in itself, they've slowed down a little bit. But when Dinwiddie goes, the Wizards go, as well as Bradley Beal. So I expect a big bounce-back game for him tonight against the Pistons. But fantasy outlook remains to be seen. He's still currently trending downward, nothing more than a top 25 to 35 in this position, which is decent. But in the same thing as the Jensen situation, he's a solid depth piece, but no one that will elevate you to the next level. In my opinion, actually pretty spicy. But I think he does bounce back. But when he does, I think he's a sell high, trade high type of player. If you want to have more season-long stars, I would again focus on the Beals, the Daniel Gaffers, the Montrezl Harrells, the Gaffers, like I said before. And those guys are the ones you kind of want to focus on, maybe a Kuzma. But besides that, the most of these types of players are sell high right now. We don't know what the Wizards are going to be like throughout the season. We don't know if this is just a quick, heated run. I would love to think that it's not, but the analytics are showing that it might. So outside of Bradley Beal, Montrezl Harrell, and Daniel Gafford, I think everyone else is sell high. And as I said before, there's no updates on the Rui Hachimura or Thomas Bryant situations. Hachimura has been playing with the Capital City Go-Go for conditioning stints, but he's still out with personal reasons. There's no definitive timeline for his return, leaning towards the end of December, as well as Thomas Bryant. Remains to be seen how their impact is. At this point, both players are avoidable on any fantasy formats, unfortunately, until we can get a clearer situation of what is going on with Rui Hachimura. And for Bryant, we kind of know what his status is, but when he comes back, just so much competition in the front court. It's a very risky fantasy play, especially if you're going to stash him out at this point. There are a lot of better stashes. Klay Thompson, if he's out there, still only in 85% of leagues, so there is some leagues left where he is pickup, pick-upable, if that's even a word. You can stash him in your IR. Dante DiVincenzo is closing to his return. Mason Plumlee, Brooke Lopez, Jonathan Isaac's the stash, even at this point. So there's a lot of other options, unfortunately. So that's what I'm saying. It's really interesting because real-life success doesn't always mean fantasy success. So even though the Wizards are still a decent team, even though they're slowing down a little bit, we got to be realistic with the fantasy expectations of the players. And outside of the three that I mentioned, Harrell, Gafford, and Beal, most of them don't trend into a top 15 percentile fantasy basketball player. And then on the Capitals flip side, Samsonov is a trending and elite goaltender in real life and in fantasy, especially in fantasy, the added value of wins. But players like Nicholas Jensen are just nothing more than depth pieces, despite being a serious consideration for the Norris Trophy. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for today's recap or this week's recap. The storylines are, changing slightly day to day, week to week, but I always got your back, always providing the analytics and fantasy sports information. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if not, I will see you guys tomorrow for the final Washington football team, Baltimore Ravens fantasy football recap of the season. Is going to be a good one. So I'm really excited to see you guys tomorrow. And without further ado, have a wonderful night. Peace.